In every level of Scholar, there are always some gank squads that will wait in a very hard to find area, and then when the enemies in front aggro, a timer is set, and then eventually the gank squad wakes up and kills you. Every time this happens, I'm not left thinking, wow, what a great game. I'm just learning that there is no reason to go through these levels slowly since there's a cheap death around every corner.
This ambush could have literally been prevented by walking instead of running, or just paying more attention to the sound of an enemy dropping down behind you.
This was also wrong. I actually agree with Joseph Anderson that Vanilla Dark Souls 2 doesn't really have any more cheap deaths than the first game. All of the confusion came from the fact that I had played Scholar and thought that this was a good representation of what Vanilla Dark Souls 2 is, when that couldn't be further from the truth, so I shouldn't have compared Joseph Anderson's Vanilla playthrough to my Scholar playthrough.
The part he showed here is a cheap ambush in the Vanilla version, which could have been prevented if he did play slower. The third one is hiding around this corner, and will aggro if you walk too much forward, so it's highly likely that he will sneak up on you from behind, as we saw in his clip. In Scholar, there is a mannequin here that doesn't automatically aggro if you walk through this room. Here is another example of how rushing can get you ambushed in Vanilla. These two show up in both versions. Where did he come from? He was hiding behind that poison bowl. In Scholar, this potential ambush is gone as well. Scholar did introduce a new ambush in this area. It's right next to a bonfire, and can be prevented by paying more attention. But Vanilla had another cheap death. The enemy is further back in Scholar, so you no longer fight him on a falling platform. Fighting Mytha while standing knee-deep in poison is yet another cheap way to die, so let us look at how both versions teach you that you can burn the windmill. Vanilla does not highlight it in any way. In Scholar, there's a passive enemy that already makes you curious. The NPC summon that became available in Scholar will also point out that there is something important here. The placement of poison urns is also more annoying in Vanilla. But that's enough of the windmill for today, so let us now take a look at some other ambushes.
Scholar literally has an upside down difficulty curve, while Vanilla has the smoothest difficulty curve I've seen.
In Vanilla, you are just getting attacked by a bunch of enemies, as we've seen in his clip where he got attacked by 3. This one might attack you, right when you pull the lever. In Scholar, they are first standing around passively, so observant players will get rewarded with an easy way of clearing them. Pulling the lever causes an ambush that's roughly the same as the default in Vanilla. There is now also this running hollow, which makes it more likely that you might notice some of the enemies that are standing around. In Vanilla, you can't see any enemies from the outside, so it looks relatively safe. The crystal lizard lures you to another cheap death. In Scholar, you can see 2 enemies from the outside, so it is more obvious that there is danger ahead. The crystal lizard is no longer luring you to an abyss. Instead, there are more here next to the bonfire. The point is that Scholar doesn't have more or worse ambushes than Vanilla. Some got added in Scholar, but many got removed or improved.
Dark Souls 1 usually rewarded patient play in areas like Sen's Fortress, where you can scan for traps, or even the bridge where you can see a smoldering black tar that indicates a fire trap could occur.
In Vanilla, the Tseldora spider gank has a few bones on the ground, but not really any spiders visible. In Scholar, the danger is much more apparent. Observant players can take care of the spiders before opening the chest. It's a dark cave, so many players will already have the torch out, which prevents spiders from attacking in Scholar. In Vanilla, you are lured to the Cyan Knight, and you can barely see their eyes turn red while walking past them, so it is highly likely that you will get ganked from behind. In Scholar, their eyes turn red long before you walk past them, so you will not get ganked from behind. In No Man's Wharf, you can get ambushed by a few pirates when you step on the boat. In Vanilla, they are all hanging out on the side path, but you haven't been taught to pay attention to pirates hanging from ledges yet. In Scholar, one is hanging on the main path to the boat. There is also a sleeping hollow in front of the next pirate that is hanging down, so it is more likely that you will notice him. Scholar has also prepared you better to pay attention to pirates hanging from a ledge. The first sleeping hollow is also harder to spot in vanilla. In vanilla, you will probably get poisoned just by entering this room. In Scholar, you just get surprised, but there is no cheap death.
Or in Dark Souls 2's case, the player will realize that the developer intention was for them to die a lot no matter how much they try to learn, which just isn't fun. It's not good, it's bad. Bad game design is heightened when you die to a cheap death, and the penalty is a lot of time wasted.
That's a very strong opinion for someone that clearly never even tried to learn to pay attention to his surroundings, and who thinks it is unfair that he gets ganked if he blindly runs around to wake up every single sleeping hollow at the same time.
Comes to clearing levels, so the volume of the instrument has never been higher. Unfortunately, the volume of the difficulty is as high as ever. Enemy placement and level design. Gone are the days of tight corridors with just a few too many enemies for the player to ever be comfortable, but not too many enemies to make the player feel like it's unfair. Dark Souls 2 takes the enemy per square inch of the first game's tight corridor level design and expands both by 5 times the space to fight enemies, and 5 times the amount of enemies.
From the very beginning, Scholar teaches players to pay attention to sleeping enemies, and that you can ignore optional encounters. When you climb up the ladder, you've already encountered sleeping hollows several times. This encounter is clearly not unfair, because the player is always in control of how many hollows they aggro at the same time. He somehow managed to always aggro them all at the same time, which says a lot more about him than about the quality of enemy placement in Dark Souls 2. You just have to put the lessons you have learned so far into practice, and pay a bit of attention to your surroundings. So to summarize, both games have ambushes, but Scholar generally prepares the player better for them and gives them better visual indication of upcoming danger. In vanilla you often get ganked by default, but Scholar gives you more possibilities to prevent these situations.